Hello, my name is Carol May Whittick, your creativity and spiritual life coach and your host of Her Conversations, Tools for the Awakening. HER is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. This is the optimal state to embody in order to attract our highest desires. What is the awakening? This is the moment in time when humanity rises up out of the darkness. Who is awakening? Each one of us present on earth today, reclaiming our sovereignty, seeking greater possibilities in our reality and looking for solutions. We know being awakened is not a lofty ideal but a necessity. If we can transform ourselves, we can change the world. Guests on Her Conversations will speak to your spirituality, sensuality and soul. Listen to their stories and hear how they are in service to the world. Let their words in these conversations embolden and inspire you. Before going into this week's episode with my guest Beth Jones, I just want to invite you over to listen to Her Inspirations, which is the sister podcast to this title. In each solo episode, I aim to inspire my midlife sisters to recognize and embrace the wisdom of our experience and to allow this next season of your life to be the most free and fruitful. Find a link to Her Inspirations in the links below. My guest this week is Beth Jones, an empowered survivor and healing mentor for survivors of trauma and abuse. She also spreads her healing message through speaking and through her book, Becoming an Empowered Survivor, You Too Can Heal from Trauma and Abuse. During our conversation, Beth shares about her awakening at age 50 and the lessons she has learned after surviving trauma and abuse to thriving in life. So as always, I begin by asking my guest, HER is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. When do you feel that higher energetic resonance?
For me, I feel that higher energetic resonance when I am aligned with and walking in my life's purpose. And it's an interesting thing for me because I've really come into my own in that in the last couple of years. Where I've really felt that energetic resonance. And that's part of being aligned with what the universe wants from me and wants me to be doing with my life. But interestingly, with me, so my life is full of juxtapositions. And one of those is that my purpose meant that I went through a long period of time in my life where I did not feel aligned to my purpose, even though I was living my purpose. Right. And what I mean by that is, my purpose in life was to have been a victim of various trauma and abuse, then to survive for many years of my life, and sometimes not in very great ways. But then I went on this amazing healing journey. That's kind of my gift from the universe, is the way I like to think about it, that has made me realize what my true life purpose is. And that's to experience my entire life, but really for the purpose now of being able to share my experience and my message about the power of healing with other survivors of trauma and abuse. So I've always been living my purpose, but I had to go through a period of time where part of that meant I didn't feel like I was living my purpose, because that's part of my purpose, was to have lived a difficult part of my life so that I can share good news about healing. I think about this. I don't know if you're familiar with like vibrational frequencies within the body. And I think about this a lot, aligned to vibrational frequencies. And, it's tied to the emotional state that we're in, and sort of vibrating at lower frequencies when you're dealing with things like shame and blame and guilt, which are a lot of the emotions for someone like me who is a survivor. We deal with those type of emotions. And as you heal and you clear those emotions out, your vibrational frequency is raising to where you're experiencing joy and love and peace. And ultimately, the theory is enlightenment, which, I don't know if any of us actually achieve, or most of us, I don't know that we achieve enlightenment in this physical form that we're in now. For each of us, but that's the theory, right? And so I sort of equate that energetic resonance and that higher energetic resonance with that higher vibrational frequency, which is also the progression that I've been through in my life, is raising my own frequency as I've gone through healing.
I just want to give you a moment, Beth, as well, before we get deeper into the conversation, to
Sure.
share a bit about what it is that took you to this moment and the work that you're doing as a result of that.
Yeah, so I about 4 years ago, I had a life-altering event, and for me, that was a hypnotherapy session that I walked into really with the idea of trying to help me figure out why I was having trouble engaging in deep relationships with people. And it was a constraint that I felt, and I was being pushed into I'd been promoted into a leadership role. I used to work in the corporate world, which we can talk about that shift at some point in time if you want. So I was a senior executive consultant for quite a while, and I'd been given a new leadership role in that world when I was still there, and that was going to require me to connect more deeply with people, both my team that I was responsible for, but also our clients. And for various reasons, I felt constrained by that, and I didn't really understand why. And so I ended up in this hypnotherapy session really to deal with that issue, and it ended up being one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. And it was the moment, I tell people it was the gateway to my healing journey, the really intense and focused part of my healing journey. It was the moment where sort of started to come to terms with my reality of having been a victim and a survivor for so long. So it was let's say a terrifying experience, but my gateway to healing. And so that led me on a, as I mentioned, a very intense and focused healing journey that I spent a good year really, really raising my vibrational frequency. So dealing with a lot of the negative emotions that I was carrying within myself and about myself, healing myself from those. And that set me on this pathway to the universe saying to me, it's time for you to now take your entire life, everything you've done in your life, everything you've experienced, and now share with the world what you've been able to do to heal yourself, to really inspire. My mission is to inspire, and my work, it's what the universe wants from me now, is to inspire other survivors of trauma and abuse to walk their healing pathway to the beauty that's there if you do the work to heal, and that's the life in which you thrive, right? Truly know love, which is what I think life ultimately is about for all of us.
So many
Yeah.
questions. So
That's good,
tell
right?
so tell me, yeah, oh of course as well. That's one of the things that I have to learn as well when I'm doing these podcasts is when my guests are speaking to me and they're sharing, like I'll have like five or six different questions come into my mind as I hear with the book.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
for me, the discipline is to ask one question at a time. Because often when I'm
Hmm.
listening back, I'm like, Carol, ask one question at a time. So I'm going to ask one question at a time.
Okay.
And I'm going to go to something you just mentioned now, actually, that I'm hearing echoed more and more. I mean, I heard it before, but in the early days of the podcast, but for some reason, there's been a resurgence of guests who have stepped away from a very intense, long period of a corporate career and have found that it's just not congruent with their soul.
Yes.
And are really recognizing that and I don't know why there's been this kind of leap or lull into it, but it's just a pattern that I've noticed again. There's been a resurgence of that, or maybe there's more guests are speaking about it and really talking about. Actually, I tell you what's different is before they just said, oh, I worked in corporate for so long and then I came out and did this, whereas now the talk is about why the corporate space wasn't correct,
Hmm.
and why it wasn't really aligning with what they were doing, and just elements of, and I'm just feeding back because I don't have any
Hmm.
experience in that arena, the elements of feeling quite suppressed, but also elements of toxicity, because when they start to kind of have an awakening to an area of themselves or start to heal themselves, and start to kind of transform within that, realize that they're in a space where people haven't done the work. And we know the vast majority of people in the world just are not doing any kind of work. So we're all kind of interacting
Hmm.
from our own unhealed parts. And then, especially when you're in a container like a work culture, a work structure, then it just blows things up all the time, which is why some of those things can be really destructive in upon people. But yet, because their finance and their means to survive in this world is linked to it, that will maintain, stay in that arena for sometimes their lifetime, their working lifetime, and not
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
come out of it, and then not deal with the part of themselves that needs to kind of move away from that or heal within it and transform, depending on the direction that their life is taking them as a result.
Yeah.
So what steps did you do to kind of move through that? Because you said you'd be given a promotion, you kind of gone
Yep.
through, and then you saw that you were seeing way more than you probably anticipated initially.
Yeah. My progression through that, I clearly, and I know my life has always been divinely led. I truly believe that. Um, but I've really, and for, various reasons, because of what my life was before I turned 50, which was around the time that I went into the hypnotherapy event. But after that, it's been 4 years now since I had that experience. I can really see the divine intervention in my life, right? And I'm on this path that has led me to exactly where I am today. And
Mm.
part of that path meant that I had to leave the corporate world in order to do the work that I'm going to be doing for the next, I don't know, 15 or 20 years, probably, is what I believe, with what I'm doing now. So, for me, it was this progression where my story was coming out of me, and it was coming out of me in a very public way. And I started to share that story publicly within my work environment, because that's the nucleus that I spent so much time in, because that's where I went every day. And I spent time with my colleagues and my clients, right? And so I'm a very open person, and I believe in authenticity, in transparency, and really showing up as who we are in every aspect of our life, including in work, right? And it's something that I've worked on and I've learned and have really grabbed onto that belief and now live it fully. But I've been through that process that many people in the corporate world go through, where they don't feel like they can be their authentic and their true self. And to your point, what you just said, many people don't ever leave that environment for all kind of fears that are there, right? They just sort of get stuck there and can't move on. For me, because I am open and have really, really grabbed on to that need to be my authentic and my true self, which, by the way, has meant that as healing, I've had to take off masks that became identities over who I really am, sort of identities covering up who I really am. And my work was one of those, right? Being in the corporate environment, who I was very successful, had a great career, enjoyed what I did, but it was a mask over who I really am and was blocking me from what I need to do, the work that I need to do in the future. But it was also a transition point, because that's, again, where I started to share my story about who I am and what I was experiencing, including, after I had the hypnotherapy event for about 9 months, I was really in a very emotionally distressed state. And I had a level of accountability and responsibility to people within my organization and also to our clients that I couldn't. Some days I literally just wanted to check out. I don't want to get out of bed today. And I couldn't do that. And so I had to engage with the organization in a way that I could still maintain the expectations of me and really ask for help and say to people, I can't do this today, and here's why, and I need your help. And I actually had a good experience with that. And I think part of that is because I had built a good rapport with people in the organization. I was well known, and had good relationships. And so when I went to people in a state of being that they had never seen me in before, but very vulnerable, um, they helped me, right? So I had a really great experience with that. But that was part of my journey of starting to get my story out there and to talk about who I'd been, what I'd experienced, what I was experiencing, and the shift that has become my life, right? So I started storytelling there, and then that evolved into, more earnest storytelling, where I've now, written what I call the Cliff Note version of my story in a collaborative book that came out a couple of years ago. And I'm now getting my story out more broadly, this format and other formats, right? So, for me, that I guess I would almost say that the corporate environment was like the resting spot for 30 years. So while I survived my personal life, which had a lot of challenges, a lot of difficulty in my personal life, for me, the corporate environment was almost a safe spot, but it's constraining to me now, or was constraining to me, because that was the only place that I was really able to share my story. And the universe wants me to be out much more broadly than that. And so it's actually sort of the divine intervention in my life that has led me down a path of, as I was telling my story more broadly, and now my colleagues and my leaders, my managers, supervisors, they know that I'm writing a book. They know that I'm going to be getting out there and connecting with people to do a different amount of work. The organization actually said to me, it's time for us to separate and part ways, which, there's a fear part of that in the moment that it happened, where my ego was like, oh, really? How can you be doing that to me? Because I've been with you for so long and I'm such a great contributor, all the things that the ego does to us. And about 10 minutes later, I had like this amazing sense of freedom, because the universe had released me from that very small nucleus of people that I was engaged with, so that I can go on and actually do the work that I'm meant to be doing, which is getting this healing message, my healing message, out into the world. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting, very interesting process for me, exiting the corporate world.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
you just said there, talking about your ego kind of going, well, what I've done for you and all this kind of thing,
Yeah.
which is obvious that you're
Yeah.
going to have those feelings, because if you've invested time and energy into building up somebody else's dream and seeing it successful, it's just natural to have those feelings.
Yes.
But what came to me is like, what was the company's ego? What was triggering them? Why couldn't they hold you, do you think? I mean, you may not know. That
Yeah,
was the question that came
I'm
that.
pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I know why. So, they were going through a process, for the practice that I was in, the segment that I was assigned to. They were going through a process of bedding down for midterm and long-term growth. And so they were putting a program in place to, make sure that they were retaining and compensating senior level people which I was one of those senior level people, to continue a revenue stream for the long term, midterm, and long term into the organization, right? So they were really looking at growth. My contract that I was under at the time, was expiring with the company at the end of next year, at the end of 2025. And I'd been vocal with them for a while, probably 2 years before, they separated me, that I was not going to renew my contract in the same capacity. So I would continue to work for the company if we could figure out another way for me to work for the company. This was part of the struggle, the inner struggle that I felt with the work that I was doing for the company versus the work that I'm called to do, right? Which is serving people. And I felt like I was not really serving people in the way that I wanted to be serving them, even though I was trying to do that in my role with my team and my clients, and all that. It was limited and I needed to be more broad. So I'd already told them, I'm not going to work for you in the same capacity anymore after my contract expires. So I had said to them effectively, I'm not part of your long-term strategy. So, or your midterm strategy, because my term runs in 18 months, is what I was saying to them. And so when they went through that process, it was very easy for them, for other, there are other more minor details that come into exactly what was happening, but, they needed to make some structural changes, and I was part of the structural change that they chose to make, because I, by definition, had told them I'm not part of your midterm or long-term strategy, which is okay. I mean, I see the progression of that now. I mean, and I look back on it now, and I'm like, I literally gave this to you. I literally told you what to do with me. Well, I mean, that's the universe intervening, actually, and through me and the organization, saying this is where you're going now.
Mm.
So, yeah.
I wanted to, another thing that I was wanting to hear as well, thank you for that
Mm,
clarity, is,
sure.
do you think that had you have not said that they would have still sensing the shift in your personality, still been able to hold you, even though, you're kind of giving them an out by being vocal about wanting to move on, but then with them sensing that you were evolving and changing, do you think that they would have been able to hold that? Because, because people tend to contain themselves within a corporate structure to maintain the corporate structure, but then you're now shifting and changing. Do you think, had you not have kind of been vocal about, well, at the end of, I'm kind of wanting something different, that maybe you made it easy for them to do something that they might not have been able to contain? That's something that popped in my mind.
I do think I made it easy for
Mm.
them. Um, and I think that, I mean, there are a lot of other aspects that come into this because if I had been the type of person who was trying to, I don't really know what the right word is, not like hold that inside of me, not, I mean, hide it. I don't want to use that word because that's not me, obviously. I was very transparent about it. But I mean, it was a shift inside of me that was coming out. Like it's like a becoming the person who I am. And you can't, when you're on that path to become the person who you are, you can't fight that. And so, I mean, there is free will. I do believe that. I mean, I think, there's a plan for each one of us in this lifetime that we have. And I think that's spiritually led. But I do believe in free will as well. And we are human beings and we do have brains and we can get in our own way sometimes of being who we actually are. And so I feel like I was going to become who I am now, one way or another, because that is the divine plan for me. Might it have taken a slightly different path to where I would have not been as vocal in the workplace, not as transparent about what was happening to me, maybe even would have hidden the fact that was writing a book, right? Maybe I would have hidden that type of thing and hidden my desire to do the healing mentor work that I do until my time with that company had ended, my contract had run, and I said, all right, now I'm going to move on, right? So I could have been quiet about that and allowed that natural progression of the contract to run and then me to move on. And I feel like that might have happened had I not been as vocal in the organization. So yes, I did help them, but I also truly believe that that's my path, right? So when I started to do that, the universe was ready for me to get out of that environment and move into the environment that I am now, right? It's time for me to do a different work that's much more broadly service centered instead of focusing on one organization and focusing on self, which is the work that I used to do. It was time for that shift. So it was going to happen one way or the other. Might it have had another 18 months to it? Maybe. But yes, I did help it, but it was happening no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say was one of the most surprising aspects of what you were discovering and recognizing in yourself, like when you start to pull off the mask, something
Oh,
that you
yeah.
may have carried for as an identity piece or a part of your person that was just a persona piece, basically, when that started to fall away and you started to meet more of yourself. What were some of the surprising aspects that you were like, oh my gosh, this is me? Like, what was coming forward that was maybe a surprise to you?
Yeah. I mean, I think it goes back to the very beginning. You know, uh, you know, um, accepting the reality and not that I was rejecting the reality, just sort of it was just sort of like buried and just kind of in my subconscious mind, including the fact that I didn't have terminology to be able to describe myself as a victim of various trauma and abuse, right? I didn't identify that way. I did not recognize myself as that person. And part of my healing journey that I went through, one of the first things that I did after the hypnotherapy is I had an insatiable thirst for knowledge about not really so much about trauma and abuse, but really more about survivorship and how people survive. And as I was reading, I could see myself all over those books. And so that was one of the most surprising things for me was coming to terms with that reality. Then also coming to terms with the fact that I'd been surviving for 45 years, just surviving. And it was this amazing experience for me. I mean, it was, again, I mean, I have so many juxtapositions in my life, which, by the way, has to do with my natal chart and me astrologically, who I am. There are explanations for the juxtapositions. But while I was coming to terms with the fact that, oh my gosh, I'm a survivor, and I'm a survivor of some really pretty awful things that I've been through in my life, it was also like this, oh, like I have these amazing explanations for why my life is like this, like these epiphanies, right? What I call universe touches, right? And the hair on my body stands up every time I think about this, but it was literally like the hand of God reaching down and saying, here, let me explain this to you. I'm going to help you understand why your life has been like this and what it is, right? And so I'm reading about this stuff in books, and there's so many aspects of that. It was the knowledge, it was I'm not alone. That's also pretty awful. I'm not alone. There's so many of us. People write about us. That's not a great thing, but I'm not alone. There are explanations for my behavior, explanations for these things in my life that I just survived and didn't really comprehend what was happening. Right. And so and then the other beautiful thing about the knowledge is that there were stories about people who are healing. And I was like, oh, well, if they can do it, I can do it. And I'm a natural born problem solver. It's what I did in my prior life professionally for a long time. I was a investigator of fraud and white collar crime, and so my job was to fact find about whatever happened in a scheme that had been perpetrated against an organization, solving the problem of what happened. And so that is innately in me. And so, of course, when it came time to heal, I was like, well, I can solve this problem for myself. Right? And so I went on this very intense process of I'm shedding this, I'm going to get rid of this, and I can because I'm starting to understand why, starting to understand who I have been, who I really am. And I'm starting to understand that I can do something about this, right? I was seeing that in that knowledge that I was getting, other survivors and their stories being shared about the work they had done, right? Which inspired me to do my own work, right? So that I think was I mean, that's pivotal to who I am, right? But discovering that, and for, a lot of reasons, it was sort of there, but not there. I mean, it's, I think about the knowledge and, that discovery that I went through. For years, I could say to you the definition of terms that actually exist for people who are survivors, right? So a great example is something called a parentectomy, which is severing the relationship with parents. And there's a professional out there guy called P. Walker, who's maybe other people who use the term too, actually given that term parentectomy to a concept that I was living, that I had done, and that I could explain to people about my relationship with my parents at the time, but I had no idea where it was coming from. Right. And I have several instances of that, right, where I'm living these things actively in my life and I could describe them to people, and dissociation is another one. So I suffer from dissociative amnesia. And for me, it was always about exploring the curiosity of memory with other people because I don't have most of my memories. And I was very curious about how other people's memories work. And like, what are you storing there? Like, are you actually recording a movie in your mind? And when you're telling me what you remember, are you watching that movie play in your mind? And it turns out that's the way it happens for a lot of people. I don't record, is what I think now is the case for me, based on the work that I've done with my trauma therapist, is I just don't record in certain instances, and I didn't for a long time. Right, but I could describe that and I could have this curious conversation, but I had no idea that it was because I had suffered, and my default mechanism in survivorship is to dissociate when I'm in a traumatic event. I had no idea that was what was happening until I started reading. Right. And so for me, those discoveries were huge because they began to explain so much of my life that I literally I had just sort of like tucked away and had no idea really existed, right, until I got to this point.
I've
Yeah,
never heard parentectomy. Can you just open up about that one, please?
sure. Yeah, and I'm happy to because it's actually a beautiful story, and it's one of the really powerful stories that I have about why we heal, the power of healing. So for me, the word heal, HEAL, the framework when I talk to people about what that means is to hope, evolve, and love. And ultimately, going through the healing process is about understanding what love means, where it comes from, how we get it, how we give it, what it really is, the different sources of love, right? Which is an exploration and a journey that I'm still on to completely understand that, which is an amazing experience I've been having for a while now. Um, but part of that, so it comes back to obviously to relationships, right? And so, my story, and one of the things that is why my story is powerful and why I need to get it out into the public is with my parents in particular, it's a really powerful demonstration of why we need to heal. So I underwent the parentectomy and was actually, I used to use the word estranged, but my parents were actually in exile for, I don't know, the better part of 10 plus years. And I had almost no contact with him during that time. And whenever I would, it was sort of superficial text messaging for, whatever reason it might be. When I undertook, and I did it for reasons because I was in a really difficult place emotionally in my interactions, primarily with my mother. And I did it because I just needed relief from the interactions that we were having that were extremely painful to me. And it wasn't out of malice or spite or to get back to her. It was really because I just needed to remove myself from what had become a toxic environment for me. It was really painful. And I did it out of self-preservation. But when I did it, I also undertook what I call the familyectomy because I completely stepped out of the family. And that's because um, I had no need for retribution or to punish my parents or to cause drama in the family. I'm a very peaceful person and I was never going to do that. And that meant that I wasn't going into a place of doing anything that looked like asking people to choose sides, my sister, for example. And so everybody went. I just stepped out of the family entirely when I undertook the parentectomy. And they stayed that way for a long time, and they would have stayed that way forever had I not gone through the healing journey that I've been through. And part of that, is a lot of self-discovery and seeing myself as a survivor. And, when I was talking about reading those books with people in them who were survivors, as I would read, I would be like, oh, that's me, that's me, that's mom, that's my dad, that's my ex-husband, right? So I would see all of us as survivors because those of us who've been through trauma and abuse, which, by the way, I think it's every one of us, it's a human condition. We've all experienced it in some way. Um, we have things that we live with that are not great, right? And I could see all of us. And as I began to have grace for and accept myself as a survivor, that also then what I call mirroring, I could see that same thing in them, right? So their behaviors and the way they acted really had more to do with them being survivors as well, and not that they were trying to be mean or ugly people to me. Now, they did hurt me. Many of them hurt me, but it wasn't what they were setting out with an intention to do, right? There were reasons for their behavior. And that process moved me into sort of seeing you that way, mirroring, and I began to let go of the negative emotions that I had around many relationships and what I call the heart constraining emotions. So you have difficult relationships with people, and we're the ones that suffer because we have emotions like anger and hate that all they do is bind our heart and prevent us from being able to love, which is ultimately what I'm trying to understand. And I could see that, right? And so as I did the work to understand myself as a survivor, I began to understand them as survivors, and I could see their behaviors coming from a place of survivorship. And I started to let go. They're just like me, right? We're all the same. And I was letting go of how I felt about myself. I was letting go of how I felt about them. Some people tell me it's forgiveness. I don't know if it is or not, but I call it letting go. It was just letting go of those negative emotions. That then led me around to wanting to see if I could re-engage in relationship. And it started with my parents and my sister. My sister was first, what I call reclaiming the relationship with her. She was first. Actually, she's the one that initiated that a few years before, but then my parents came around. And that's not, we have a relationship. They're no longer in exile. I actually was living in Hong Kong when I was going through my healing journey. The intense part of it, I was in Hong Kong. I moved back. It's been almost 3 years now since I moved back to the United States. And the main reason that I moved back was to be with my family, to try to reclaim this relationship. So I've gotten to that point where I have a relationship with my parents. It's not perfect. We're still working on it and probably always will be, but they are no longer in exile. And that is a beautiful outcome of my healing journey. It's one that I'm tremendously grateful for. And it's a beautiful story and one that has to be told because you can get there. You can. I've
Mm.
done
I've noticed there's like you've got like a dragonfly
it.
in your ear, and then I notice like obviously this is audio, so I have to describe, but I noticed the dragonfly in your ear and then on the wall and then also on the cover of your book as well. What is the
Yes,
significance of that? I'm assuming there's a
there
link.
is. Yeah. Yeah. So dragonfly is my spirit animal. And the primary meaning in my life of dragonfly is transformation.
Mm.
And that's because I am the epitome of transformation. And that is what I've done with my life. And it could not be the more perfect spirit animal for me. Yeah, so that's the significance. Yeah.
Yeah, I
And also it's also about change and high adaptability, which are also me. I'm
mm,
completely unresistant to change and highly adaptable. And that actually has been a bit of a plus and a minus for me in my life. So it can be an Achilles heel for me because I'm so highly adaptable that I can um, convince myself that something I might not choose is something that I can live with happily. And so it's something I work on quite a lot now, actually, in making sure that the things that I'm doing in my life are things that I would choose to do and not me adapting to what somebody else wants me to do, which is an
mm,
interesting, um, it's a very fine line,
yeah.
a
And
very fine line there sometimes.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
takes a while to get there as well
Mm,
as well. I'm
mm.
hearing what you're saying and echoing back from experiences where that you're just going over like actually that I don't prefer that right now and really answering the call of what you want instead
Yes.
of going into that adaptability, which sometimes sometimes there are needs for compromise depending on the situation, but oftentimes adaptability, if I think of times that I've adapted in situations, have been ignoring core needs or core
Mm.
expectations in terms of how I deserve to be treated. But then the more I built up my own deserving, then it was like, this isn't the thing. This isn't going to work.
Yes.
There's no space to be adaptable here other than to say that, to explain as best as possible that a situation is not what I prefer at that moment in time. And then the response really depends on the level of healing that the other person has done on themselves to actually realize that it's not always just about them. Sometimes it's not a personal attack. It's not even a personal rejection. It's the situation or the event or something like that that you have to not be a part of for your own self-preservation and your self survival and growth and thriving and all of
We,
those things.
we could talk about this alone for an hour. I
Oh
have
yeah.
so much experience with this. So, and
Yeah.
so I'll just say this about it. So, part of the journey that I've been on, right, and understanding really understanding love, right, and it's sort of been this journey where the universe has taught me about everything from, you know, I think for many of us, when we focus on the word love, we sort of have society or the movie world's view of what love is, right? And it's, between two people who have some sort of an intimate relationship, right? That's where we are, which is could not be further from the truth. And I've been on this journey to understand where it comes from and exploring it from many different facets. And, one of those has been some lessons for me, beautiful lessons for me around self-love.
Mm.
And I've watched myself from a relationship standpoint. So it's me trying to, explore and understand what love is. At the same time, I'm still trying to get that intimate relationship right in my life. And I see the convergence of these two things coming. And I watch myself becoming less and less tolerant and less willing to adapt and actually recognizing that when I'm evaluating somebody else's life to see if like you're a person I could actually have a long-term relationship with, my mind is in that place now of being, am I adapting or is your life and those things about you something that I would actually choose for myself? Right.
Mm.
But it's been a really interesting progression, including that it started with me exiting relation, I was married for a very long time. So, part of my survivorship was being in a 30-year marriage with another survivor. That was it was a challenge. It was not a not a bad person, but a difficult person emotionally because of his own survivorship and the person he was to live with. And I exited that relationship as part of this. I'm not adapting anymore. And I'll tell you where that really started, was identifying my own emotional needs, right? So, kind of back to what you were saying just a minute ago, right? And part of my self discovery, because I lived in this world that I was just, I don't know, I was just kind of like, I guess for 45 years, I was just kind of like this being. It's almost like I can almost like an out of body experience. Sometimes I have to look over and see that person, who that person was. And I'm like, I don't even know really, like, I don't remember feeling like that person, being that person, living that person's life. But it was 45 years of a life that was there. Part of what I had to go through the self discovery was understanding what my emotional needs were, which was a very painful process through trauma therapy to work through that. But the moment I began to identify my emotional needs is when I began to realize that I just adapt. I just adapt, right? And so what I need is not really what you're giving me, but I adapt to what you can give me, which became insufficient in my marriage. And it's been insufficient. Like as I've gone through this dating process, I can see they come in, I learn what I meant to learn. I would be adapting. What they can give me is insufficient and they're out, right? So that's a cool process to watch happen. Also, the universe intervening in my life to teach me and to guide me and to help me get it right the next time. But that emotional needs part, like in knowing yourself, I mean, that was huge for me
Mm,
in understanding what I was doing when I was just adapting to the person who was
mm,
in my life. And I talk about it in the context of that relationship, but it was happening in a lot of other relationships
mm.
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we all do it. The nature of the way that society has been set up for now
Hmm.
has meant that we've all gone into this adaptive state where, doing like kind of giving and sacrificing ourselves and not meeting our own
Mm,
needs is seen as the valiant thing to do, which is anything but that,
I
because then
agree.
becomes so conditional. And then also there's this underlying um, feeling of like resentment that grows, and you probably wouldn't even necessarily notice that you've got this kind of undercurrent of resentment, and not because you're just kind of hating on the person, but there's a part of you that is crying out to be like, me, and the only way that it can really um kind of let you know that it's there is to kind of pull you into, we're talking about the states of consciousness, into like something that is heavy and something that
Yeah.
you are almost going to trip over. Like how
Yes.
else are you going to notice that something's on the ground if you won't look around you and be aware of what's happening? Then it has to take you out, so that,
Yes.
okay, right, and what was that? And then
Yeah.
build from there. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're right about that, because I mean, I was married for almost 30 years. And I literally did not begin to see my ex-husband until the day that I had hypnotherapy. And so I had one of those events where the reality of the relationship, or sort of the rug of the relationship, gets pulled out from underneath you. So I came home that day and I had been, I mean, it was like I said, it was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. And I had been emotionally distraught for I mean, I've been crying for probably 6 hours by the time I got home that day. And I'm, it's visible on me. If I've been crying, you can tell, for a while. And when I walked in the door, to my flat that day, he didn't even get up off the couch, and like not even, oh, what's the matter with you? And something is terrible, and I'm sorry, and you get up and hug me. You're gonna be nothing. And I started telling him what had happened that day. And one of the first statements that he made to me, he said to me, "Oh, that explains a lot." That was his reaction to me. So I'd been with someone for 30 years who didn't have the ability to meet me where I was, and one of my most emotionally distressed places I'd ever been in my life. And I mean, I've done a lot of searching on why that was, and I needed to, and I understand now why that was. But that was the first day that I I really began to see him for who he is. And he's a person who has a hard time seeing beyond himself. And I don't say that in an ugly way or a mean way, but that's just part of his survivorship and who he is. But he was no longer going to be able to serve my needs. And I was moving into that place of seeing him for who he is and recognizing that he wasn't, my time with him was done. And what I needed to learn in my relationship with him was done. And he was no longer going to serve my highest and best good. And so it was one of those events that it sort of pulls the rug out from underneath you. And then, I ended up, exiting a 30-year marriage because it was time. Right?
Mm.
And it's an interesting place to be.
Yeah. But that's
Yeah.
so brave though, also
Mm,
to step out of, so you stepped out of some like major,
I
some,
have.
so the marriage,
Transformation, honey. It's the dragonfly. It's what I'm all about.
you
It's my
complete,
spirit animal.
oh wow, of course, like you
Yeah.
completely stepped out of that as well, and
Yeah.
and to just like reflect back to you and commend you for taking that step
Thank
into
you.
your like
Thank
soul's
you.
work, because it's
Yeah.
not,
Thank you.
these things are easily said in a sentence. Oh, I left my, I left the corporate world. Oh, I, ended my marriage. And it just makes it sound like two little sentences. But we can't deny that these are two major,
Yes.
like they're holding you in terms of the way that the world sees you and
Yes.
reflects and contains
Yes.
you, and feeds you financially, which then, holds you, but then
Yes.
also emotional space. So to then walk away from both of those things is, shouldn't go without at least someone saying back to you that it I can kind of understand the vastness of that, and also the bravery, because many people would not do that.
Yeah.
And one thing I'll say about, I've never been in a big career where I've had to kind of walk away. I've just had jobs that I've gone nah and walked away from them. So it's never
Mhm.
been that big. And so I've always like kind of moved on anyway. I've never like put my stake in the ground long enough to build anything up
Yeah.
and then go, oh, I need to leave. It's like I usually, if like when I had jobs, it'd be around about a 3-year itch maximum, where I'd be like, oh, so it would be like, I can't, I just have this feeling where I couldn't and I can't, and I just had to move on.
Hmm.
Um, but to have stayed in that space for so long, and then to go, no, I'm going to change my life, and also doing it not when you're in your 20s, when women kind of really hold on to what they've created,
Yeah.
believing that there's nothing else. If I leave now, it's too late, it's done.
Oh,
Exactly. No.
I'm in the prime of my life. I literally think I'm 53 and I literally think I could be sitting at the midpoint of my life. I have a
You
lot of life left, a
you
lot
and
of
me
it.
both.
I
You and
do.
me both. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think as well, and that I sense a shift around that also as well, that more and more women of
Mm.
mid-age are actually showing up in a completely different way, that's very different than our mothers and our
Yeah.
grandmothers, what their life looked like when they reached 50 as well. Because if I think about, what 50 looked like when I was 25, it was like, whoa, so far. And like it's so far and so old, and like, oh, those poor 50-year-old women, God bless them, it's all over for them now. They need to sort it out and get it
Yeah.
all, stressed out. And it's funny because now when I'm speaking to young women of 25 and 30 who are having like these major crises and like meltdowns and thinking that time's running out, like trying to lovingly speak to them, going, no, time's not
Yeah.
running out, but there are certain things that are on your side, like your metabolism. So sort your
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's exactly
little things
right.
like that. So, like,
Yeah.
have your fun, but yeah, like work
Yeah.
with your body while your body works with you. But
Yeah.
aside from those things as well, the things that get blown up in their mind as like life and death and all or nothing
Mm.
to be sorted out there, I'm like,
Yeah.
listen, trust me, you don't, as much as you believe you know yourself, you don't. And that's not to be condescending.
Absolutely.
like
Yeah.
take away from the intelligence that you have,
Yeah.
but there will be just levels of learning and knowing yourself
Yeah.
that increase
Yeah.
with time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then when
Absolutely.
I know for me, when I got to 50, I was like, made it. It was just this kind of like, I can't believe I'm here,
Yeah.
because one, what I thought 50 might feel like physically, let alone anything else, like was no further, couldn't be further from the truth. I didn't feel
Yeah.
broke.
Agree.
I
Yeah.
didn't feel like, there was no kind of anything like that. I
Yeah.
like didn't have like this terrible breakdown of a menopause or anything like that, So
No,
all
me
these
either.
things that were
Yeah.
supposed to come and take me out, that I was almost like primed for. I'm like, okay, come on, brain
Never
fog.
happened.
Just
Right?
didn't really happen, like maybe there are
Okay.
sleepless nights, but this whole kind of like collapse into this midlife that then you kind of like roll down the hill to the end
Yeah.
of your life. It
Yeah.
it wasn't that at all. It was
No.
I've made it. I've been alive for 50 years, which is a big number. And then looking back on those decades of experience where I had real clarity about this is what my 20s were like, this is what my 30s were about, this is what my 40s were about,
Yeah.
and like, my 40s, but so kind of look back on life in like 10-year periods and really see
Mm.
the arc and the experience of what you have. So that wisdom that you turn up with at 50, you have a greater perspective. And then, of course, then you look
Yes.
forward and go, hang on, like, I don't feel like I'm going to die in 10 or years time. Like, of course, we don't know, something might fall out of the sky and take us out. But
Yeah.
ultimately, I'm not feeling this frailty. I'm not feeling that I'm losing any energy or clarity. If anything, I feel like I'm gaining more because I can put things together now and they make so much more sense. And also, I don't need the approval of anybody to be doing what I'm doing, which is something that was still, lingering in the back of my mind in
Yeah.
previous decades. It's like, yeah, I want to do this, but what about that person? What about this person? And having got to this stage now, I'm like, the people's whose opinion that I used to hang so much on, what are they doing now? Why did, like, not much.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
why
Exactly.
why did I, like, put over my entire self-esteem to people who are
Mm-hmm.
not living a life that was authentic to themselves?
Yeah.
So the people that I listen to now, or have been now, are like, if you're not there in it, walking it and living it for yourself, then I appreciate your point of view, but your opinion counts very little,
Yeah.
because at this point in time, really, it's time to really take all the experience in the life that you've had and turn it into something meaningful for your own life, so that the women that I notice that have vitality and are really the ones that are have a sense of joy around them. Because one thing I will say that I do notice as we mature, as we go into our 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, what surrounds us is an energetic field of
Mm.
um experience of your heart. Yeah, so it's not even
Yeah.
just about what you look like, it's about where are you in your heart, where are you in your healing, how do you feel about your
Yes.
life? Because
Yes.
as you grow into your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, you don't want to be, and we all know them, that crotchety old woman that nobody wants to go near, because there is a field of energy around her of unhealed trauma
Yeah.
and bitterness and fear and disappointment that will suck you like a vortex into it. And that's
Yes.
why
Yes.
people that you just struggle to be around for any length of time. And you care for them and everything like that, but it's just like, and those are the people that put you off aging and going more
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
wisdom. And then there are others that you meet that are just joy and delight, and you just could sit at their feet for hours and hours.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm really learning, okay, this is what this period of time is like, is to heal and to clean your stuff up, but also to give back, but give back in a way that gives those girls that are freaking
Mhm.
out at 25 and thinking their lives are over, hope that life turns into something different. It doesn't
Something
have to
beautiful.
be downhill. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 So those are things
Yeah.
that I'm learning about this, and knowing
Yeah, I
also.
mean, I think what you're describing is the work what I first said when we were talking about the higher energetic resonance, right? It's raising that vibrational energy within each of us, right? Our vibrational frequency is coming up as we heal,
Mm,
right? And so we are becoming more of a light in the world, And for me, that's also about unlocking that bind on the heart. So the difficult things that we go through closes our heart, which is where some of those challenging emotions that come out of people that you're describing, that's where they come from. And in the healing process, unlocks that and
Mm,
again brings that light out of us, right?
mm,
Brings joy and happiness out of us.
mm.
Yeah.
And don't we all want that? Don't we all want that for all of us? Um,
Yes.
one of the things I just wanted to touch on as well that I saw when I was just looking at the information about your book that have you started it already, the community that you're building, the
Yeah,
Facebook?
so it's in the process. I'm in the process of standing it up now. I mean, the community I've been building for, probably about 3 years now, organically, right? As I connect with people and talk to people. And even before I left my organization and, continuing now, I spend a lot of time mentoring people. And that's what my work will be, is how I define it as a healing mentor. Um, and helping, again, really inspiring people with my story, to do the work to heal. And then, if they need help, guidance along the way, I'm happy to do that. But I really am inspiring broad groups of people is really what I'm meant to be doing, through, outlets like this where people will hear me talk about the power of healing. The community itself, I am in the process of standing it up now, and it will really go live fully, after the book launches in October. And that has to do a lot with a lot of the creative content that's coming behind it. So, I still have a lot to say. The book is like draw a line in the sand about what my healing process had been to that point and what my learning was. And of course, it continues. I'm always going to be healing. I tell
Mm,
people that, and it's kind of a news flash. If you don't believe this about yourself, you're always going to be healing. Have I healed my past and some of the most difficult things in my life are behind me? I believe that to be true, but as we said before, I don't know what tomorrow holds, right? I mean, death being one of those, or some traumatic event that I may, experience, and I mean, to your point, I mean, the divorce and me leaving my corporate environment were two traumatic events that I have been through, right? That I've major traumatic events I've been through, and I've had to heal, do some healing work around those as well, but much quicker, when I was dealing with leaving my professional world than when I was going through my divorce. Um, but I will continue to give my healing message out to the world, to people who need to hear it. And I do that through conveying my stories and what's happening to me. And so it will be done in real time. That's part of what the community will hold, is, a place for me able to share in real time when I'm processing various things, when I have the learnings that I'm so grateful to be giving from the universe and the experiences that I have. That's coming. And so a lot of that is in development now. And I know, broader message sharing in the future is out there. I'm probably going to write more books, which before I wrote this one, I was like, I'm never writing my own book, and never say never. I've learned that lesson about 15 times in my life. And at some point in time, I'm going to quit using that word, but such as it is. So yeah, the community is actively in development now. It will be completely live in a more formal way than it is now, in early October. Yeah.
thank you.
Super exciting for me. It's amazing. Yeah. By the way, it's
Oh,
called Empowered Survivors,
mm,
which leverages the name of the book because, that's what I am, as an empowered survivor. And I will never, turn away from the fact that I am a survivor, because it's a huge part of my story and who I really am.
yeah.
But I am super empowered to get my healing message out there. So that's what I'm hoping to inspire other people to become as well, as empowered survivors. Take control of their life. Heal.
And I
Yeah.
love the acronym again. Can you repeat that?
Yeah. The acronym is HOPE, EVOLVE, and LOVE. All as actions for me. So as verbs. And that's kind of the framework that I talk to people when I'm working with them, around healing, is what it means to hope, what it means to evolve, and what it means to love, which that part I'm really still working on.
Aren't we all? Don't worry.
Yeah.
Aren't we all? It's a
Yeah.
constant, never-ending circle and cycle of just
It
peeling
is.
back and finding another nugget and another way to go deeper into
Yeah.
finding out who you are and then bringing that out into the world. So, great
Yeah.
conversation, Beth. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. It's been great.
Good. Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Please let everybody know where they can connect and find you.
Right now, the best place is at my website. It's www.empoweredsurvivors.com. And Empowered Survivors is all one word. And don't forget the S on the end, survivors, because there are many of us.
Perfect. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Beth, for sharing your story and your wisdom with me, and thank you for listening. If you found value in this episode, I encourage you to like and share the episode and leave a comment. If you want to find out more about me, my website is carolmaywhittick.com, carolmaywhittick.com. Connect with me on Facebook or LinkedIn under Carol May Whittick, and on Instagram, Kazmic, Cazmick. Until the next episode, take care of yourself. Thank you. Bye-bye.